To introduce things, we may ask why a seminar on the value philosophy of von Hildebrand, the very question that John Henry put last night. And I think there are a couple of good answers to that. First of all, the idea of value and the thing that von Hildebrand calls the world of value, the hierarchy of value, is absolutely foundational for his thought. You can see this in his ethics, which is probably his major single philosophical work. The first 14 chapters of the ethics are in fact a general theory of value. And on that basis of the value theory, at the beginning of the book, he then builds his ethics. But it holds also for his aesthetics, that it's all built on his value philosophy. It holds for his philosophy of community. It holds for his philosophy of the human person. The understanding of value and the place of the human person in the world of values is fundamental to all the contributions that he made to philosophy. And the other reason why it's, I think, good to start here, or at least to devote an entire seminar to the value philosophy of von Hildebrand, is that we find here in his value philosophy some of his most seminal insights, some of his most significant contributions to philosophy. So, if the Dietrich von Hildebrand Legacy Project is going to present and interpret the thought of von Hildebrand, it will certainly have to present and interpret his philosophy of value. And that's what this seminar is all about. Now, you may then ask, but why have you set the seminar up as a kind of dialogue between von Hildebrand's value philosophy and the thought on good in Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas? Well, Western philosophy, since Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, has been concerned with the good, with agathon, with bonum. And at first glance, it may sound as if von Hildebrand, with his value philosophy, is dealing with the very issues that Plato and Aristotle dealt with. And so the question arises, is von Hildebrand's value philosophy just a restoration of the philosophy of good in Plato or Aristotle? Is it just an ancient doctrine of good in contemporary language? Or does the doctrine of Hildebrandian value contain something new? Does it enhance the philosophy of good that we receive from the ancients? Is it perhaps in some way at odds with that philosophy of good? Are there points of tension here between von Hildebrand and the great tradition in which he stands? Now, these questions are so natural and pressing that we've built them into the seminar. These are integral to the seminar, and in particular, how von Hildebrand stands in relation to the philosophy of good in Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas. My friend and colleague, Jonathan Sanford, who knows this philosophy of good, will represent it here in our seminar. And not only just represent it, but present it in a way that initiates this dialogue between von Hildebrand and the tradition of philosophy in which he stands. You might say that Dr. Sanford will bring his great competence in this area to the seminar and also keep me honest. He won't just let me say Aristotle said this, St. Thomas said that, but he's here to see to it that I get it right, and I expect to learn things about that Aristotelian tradition from him in the seminar. Let's maybe just pick out some leading idea from the Prolegomena. It is, I think, one of the clearest and most accessible accounts of phenomenological philosophy that we have. You all know that that was von Hildebrand's philosophical formation in the school of Husserl, with Scheler and Adolf Reinach. Those were his teachers, and so much that is distinctive about the value philosophy goes back to the phenomenological way of working. And many accounts of phenomenology are full of Husserlian jargon, full of talk about a phenomenological reduction and an epoche, and not easily understood, whereas this Prolegomena gives you, I think, the genius of phenomenology without all the heavy jargon. So I recommend it highly as a source of understanding phenomenology. But of course, we want to read it as an explanation of the way in which von Hildebrand approaches value. It's very helpful for understanding von Hildebrand to think of his approach to philosophy, his phenomenological approach, as a resolute anti-reductionism. So the approach in philosophy that says, for example, moral conscience is nothing but a Freudian superego. That's just this reductionism that von Hildebrand deplores. Or if one says lived conscious experiencing, that's nothing other than brain function. That, again, is this reductionism in philosophy. And bring it closer to home. Take value. To say value is nothing other than the aptitude of a thing to satisfy some need of a person. That's a reductionistic account of value. So von Hildebrand, as phenomenologist, is supremely concerned with letting, as the phenomenologist said, letting each thing show itself from itself, and capturing whether moral conscience or consciousness or value or whatever one is philosophizing about, capturing it in its distinctive character without right away folding it into something else or reducing it to something simpler. So we'll see as we go some specimens of this resolute anti-reductionism of von Hildebrand. And I just want to say from the outset, therein lies the distinctive phenomenological focus of his way of philosophizing. We have to first clarify the concept of importance. It's a kind of technical term in von Hildebrand, but it is supposed to express a very definite experience. You could, it's an expressive phrase that I think is helpful, say that something of importance lights up. You encounter something, and it does have this resonance in your volitional or affective life, and one can say that it lights up with importance for you. It doesn't just remain neutral or indifferent to you. So then he says that there's a very broad sense of good or bonum, a very broad sense of bad or malum, which means simply positive or negative importance, prior to the division into any categories of importance. And that division into positive and negative is very significant. So something important not only can draw us, but it may show its importance by repelling us, by filling us with aversion. And then we have to do with what he calls negative importance. So there is then importance, which exists as positive or negative. That is, the importance withdraws or which repels. And then there is the absence of any importance at all, whether positive or negative, and that would be the merely neutral. So that perhaps sounds abstract, but it already touches upon some of the questions that Dr. Sanford will raise later, because you see that importance and then good in all of its categories has for von Hildebrand this contrary opposite of bad. There's this contrary opposition obtaining between positive and negative importance. And so evil is not, or bad is not just the absence of importance, but something antithetically opposed to positive importance. That raises some interesting questions when we set von Hildebrand in relation to Aristotle and St. Thomas. We have just time to introduce these first two categories of importance, which, as you see, are called the importance of the merely subjectively satisfying on the one hand, and the importance of value on the other. And it's perhaps best and most in line with this respect for experience in von Hildebrand to work with revealing examples. So he mentions the subjective satisfaction we feel in the face of a compliment. Now, I'd like to modify his example and say an undeserved compliment, of which I know that it's undeserved, and still take delight in it. The compliment lights up with importance when I receive it, though I know it is excessive and I don't really deserve it. That, I think, is a perfect example for the importance of the subjectively satisfying. And you see that the thing gets lifted out of neutrality, it lights up with interest because of the way it intersects with my subjective satisfaction. Because of my vanity, that undeserved compliment is full of importance, full of interest. I listen closely and want to hear it said again. It's far from indifferent to me. But the whole principle, the whole driving force of that importance is my vanity, my subjective satisfaction. If I weren't so vain and weren't vulnerable with this subjective satisfaction, well, hearing the undeserved compliment wouldn't have any positive importance. It might even have negative importance for me. I might be offended at the shameless flattery of the other person and see nothing but negative. So the positive importance is sustained entirely by my subjective satisfaction. And you can't say that the undeserved compliment has any importance in itself. It only has importance for me, who in my vanity am flattered by the undeserved compliment. Now, take an example from value. Take really any example of, let's say, heroism that you admire. Take your favorite hero, your favorite moral hero, or your favorite saint, and think of the admiration, perhaps even the awe-filled veneration that you feel for that person. That, von Hildebrand wants to say, is evidence of the thing that he calls value. Because there's something important, all right, something that doesn't leave you neutral, something that resonates in you volitionally and affectively, but it's clear that your subjective satisfaction doesn't contribute anything. It's simply the heroism of the saint. Thomas More stands up resolutely to the king and loses his head over it. We're full of admiration for that story, but the thing that commands our admiration and awakens it is a certain inner splendor of the moral strength of the other. And that inner splendor is, he calls it value, to express the idea. It's entirely proper to the person whom you admire. You don't, with your approach and your subjective satisfaction, you don't contribute anything to the appearance of that moral or religious value in the other. It is rather experienced, and here one has to attend closely to what is given in experience. The moral hero is experienced as having a dignity, an excellence, a nobility, a splendor that is altogether proper to him, and in no way contributed by you or co-constituted by you and your approach. So that you can say, even if I weren't there to admire and venerate the person, he or she would still be altogether worthy of my admiration and veneration. And that worthiness of admiration, that is Hildebrandian value. That's a kind of importance independent from all subjective satisfaction, radically proper to the being that whom we admire or venerate. The value admired is the principium, the source, and the delight then that I take is all my response to that source. Whereas with the subjectively satisfying, the principium is my subjective satisfaction, and the importance derives from that and is the principiatum. So there's a dependency of the importance of the subjectively satisfying on my subjective satisfaction. Whereas with value, my delight for its part depends upon this first understood value of the admired person. So that is fundamental to von Hildebrand, and so for him it's never an objection to value that it produces intense feeling, it causes a profound response. None of that calls into question the value experience, as long as all of that intense feeling is engendered by the value which is first understood as a as an inherent, intrinsic excellence of a thing. Because then my response doesn't help bring the value into being. It's a kind of responsiveness in me to a value that stands on its own.